Welcome to Petro Media Inc. I'm your host, Terrence Anderson, and today we're going to talk about the Roland Fantom X. This is my Roland Fantom X, and I have the X6, and in the previous video, we discussed a bunch of different things going on with the machine, and some of the things I cosmetically need to deal with. Again, nothing too much to really worry about. I picked up the Fantom X because I wanted a couple of things moving forward. Number one, I wanted a keyboard that I could use as a MIDI controller that had a very specific feel to it. The keys on the Fantom X6 feel phenomenal. I mean, yes, there are better feeling keys if you really want to go back to, that time frame. The best keys I ever felt were out of a Kurzweil keyboard, but a Kurzweil keyboard is just a sound generator with phenomenal sounds, amazing sounds, but it doesn't do anything else. And unless you're a keyboard player, it doesn't matter. I don't really need those specific sounds because this covered that. We'll start with the bad. The least favorite thing I have with this thing is the drum pad. The drum pad feels terrible. And that's a consistent thing with Roland for a long time. When it came to any of these small square pads, there was always this issue of these feel terrible. Why do these feel terrible? And although they're lit up and everything, and that's great, they just don't feel great. I can't figure out what it is. It's just the pads don't feel good. They're just so hard. Now, it's great that they're illuminated. There's a lot of little tricks you can do with them. With the hold button, you can lock things in. So if you hit the roll and you hit hold, that could be helpful when you're doing production. The pad settings, as you can see on the screen, you can select what kit you're going to use for the pads. Permanently or temporarily, or however you want to go with that. And there's a bunch of resolution things you can do. For example, if I wanted to change the roll, I could change the roll. Super easy. And you can write it to the system so that whenever it starts up, this is the default. So you can drum with this if you needed to. Let me turn the hold off. Like, you could drum with it. That's not the problem. You're going to get finger fatigue. And that's the problem with these pads. Sample section. If you go to the sample list, we'll flip over that in a moment. The sampler in here will load every sample you have on your compact flash card, which is on the back. Now, that makes it take forever to load. By itself, this keyboard takes about 40 seconds to a minute and a half to load, depending by itself. If you plug in the compact flash, that's when it takes a while. I need to go make coffee. I know about 4 minutes later, it's going to be fully loaded, but once it's loaded, you have full access to all your samples. Turn it up just a little bit. So this is like an 808 kick, one of my claps. This is my dirty 808. And the list hasn't moved much. We all know that note. I'm not going to say it. I can do phrase sampling, but I didn't do phrase sampling with this. And the list is just insane. Oh, I saw something. Hold on. What's this? Yeah, there's a lot going on there. This is the stock stuff that comes with the machine.
Step up
This is very much early 2000. When I heard this for the first time, I thought it was like Missy Elliott or something.
Yeah. Keep it coming. Keep it coming, boy.
None of this is appropriate.
Oh, yeah. Holla if you hear me.
Break it down.
I mix it up.
Break it down.
He's really angry.
East side.
And there's like a ton of other ones in here. They have a resample back. The skip back sampling is actually a pretty cool tool because let's say I turned it on. It's waiting to hear what I'm doing. So like this is an example. So it should have skipped back and so the skip back sampling, what it does is it goes through and listens to, I think, the last 10, 15 seconds of whatever you're doing at the moment and resamples it and creates a temporary sample for you to fiddle with. And then you can save it and edit it however you want it to be. And I can just turn that off so it just erases it. Let's go over to another section of this keyboard real quick. So this section here is the 8-track recorder. This thing has a built-in 8-track recorder. The 8-track recorder in here is basically no different from any other 8-track recorder. Based on how much sample space you have will determine how much it can actually record. You're allowed to record up to 8 tracks of content on here, and it lays it out in a very easy, manageable way to deal with it. Just like you were recording in a DAW. On the back of the keyboard, one of the inputs allows for mic input, but you still would I would still recommend using a mic preamp to boost the signal before you send it into here, especially if you have a condenser mic, because this doesn't have 48 volts phantom power. But the fact that it can record audio directly onto it with an 8-track recorder, similar to how the 5000 is kind of amazing for that time. If I was a singer, I could do a full demo of a beat with my vocals in the Phantom, recording the Phantom, and then I would just take the Phantom with me to go to a session and play it back at the studio if they really wanted to hear what I'm working with. Normally, there's a 16-track mixer. The 16-track mixer has nothing to do with the 8 tracks. So you get the 8 tracks plus this, that's 24 tracks of audio that you can deal with. 16 of them are just MIDI, 8 of them are just audio. But this is the mixer for the MIDI side of things. And if we dive into the song edit section, you see it shows you the data in blocks of bars. So for this track, for example, it shows you bar 1, bar 2, 3, 4, what's going on with each bar. I forgot how long the song is. If I wanted to go in and edit that, I can actually dive into it. And if I go to track view, it explodes the track so you can see what data is on the tracks. And if I go down and see now, I can see what's in that one. I want to do micro edit of the data. I can pull up the MIDI data. I can make adjustments to each of the notes if I want to. This keyboard was freaking ridiculous for its time. And we're just scratching the surface on what it can really do. Going into the effects section, the effects section is interesting because you can choose which way you route the effects, what it is. As you can see, I'm going through is the equalizer, tremolo, pan, rotator. There's a ton of stuff in here. Let's go to the rotator. The rotator is like one of my favorite because it's basically like a, what's that thing called there? VK rotator. That is like a rotary motor speaker for a Leslie speaker. If you don't know what a Leslie speaker is, you should Google that. But you hear it all the time in church if you've been to church. It's usually hooked up to the organ. You can determine which way it's structured. So it could be 1, 2, and 3 parallel, 1 and 2 in series, to 1 and 3 in series, or you can tell 2 of them to feed into 1. So I can have 1 and 2 feeding into 3 and vice versa and just rotate around. Or I can have them all in series and determine which one is first and which one's last. I can't express how deep and how amazing that actually is. I can go in and go even deeper into it and make more adjustments on the actual patch itself for the rotator and add different layers to it. So it's like you have the effect three effects. Out of those three effects, let's just go back a little bit. Let's just start this over. So you're routing. I'm doing the VK rotor for the first one, right? So I'm in number one. And then I go to the structure of it and I decide how I want them to flow. And then I go to the actual effect itself and I adjust all the parameters, all the different parameters, right? Right? Following me so far, right? Then I go even deeper and say, I want to add a whole bunch of extra crap to it just because I can, and adjust the way it behaves. That's crazy when you think about it. And then you still have a separate chorus and reverb to fiddle with on top. And if I'm correct, yeah, they have nothing to do with those three first effects. 1, 2, and 3, I was just in 1. That was just me in 1 and how 1's going to behave. And then you can still have chorus and reverb on top of that. And then you decide how they route and how much of each goes to where. Do you see how ridiculous this is? And mind you, you're still not even leaving the box yet. You still have to decide. You have 4 outputs. A has 1 and 2, B has 3 and 4. You have 1 and 2, 3 and 4. You can decide, you could have the effect go out to 3 and 4 for the reverb and the chorus, or 1 and send 1 to 4, send 1 to 3, and then have these go to 1 and 2, or have them go to 3 and 4. There's so much that can be decided with where things are going that this just gets out of hand really, really fast. And this is phenomenal for that. I'm probably the most excited person about it. And then we're not even discussing the mastering effects on top of that, because now you can add your EQs however you want it. You can adjust for compression. You can boost. These are like, settings that are already there, user settings that are already there. But you can literally add your EQ and compression one time and, essentially master your mix in this thing before even sending it out to anything. Do you want to do that? I don't know if you want to do that. That's a personal preference. If this was the only keyboard you could afford to buy and you're a player, you could play the keys and you couldn't afford a nice computer or a mic, a full setup for the studio, this will cover you. And I believe that behavior has been carried forward with the newer Phantoms. I think the most recent Phantom is like phenomenal machine that eventually some point I'll actually buy. But that's just discussing those things. Then you have performance layer split. This is mainly for those gig musicians who want to add layers and structure for each section of the keys. What that does is you can decide what's in this section, that section, or the whole keyboard, and you can adjust how many keys it crosses. And just to scroll down, this thing gives you 16 parts. You can have 16 different instruments playing at the same time based on where your fingers are on the keys. When you go to see like those one-man band guys and ladies, this is what they're doing. There are quite a few keyboards that do this. This didn't have to be in here, but they put it in here anyway. It doesn't make it the best, but it's pretty damn good, because it's a lot of those gig keyboards only give you 4 to 8. This gave you 16 because it's already a workstation. So Roland said, F it, here you go. Heading over to this section of the keyboard, you have your real-time controls that are assignable. You can assign a couple of different switches to be very specific to what they do. The shift key comes into play a lot right now, because if you hit the shift key, it pulls up the menu and you can assign what these buttons do. We're not going to do that right now. You can dive deeper into other things. For example, my favorite button, one of the other main reason I bought this machine was because of the Chord Memory button. Chord Memory, it turns on. Chord Memory. Now, if I want to adjust that, I just hold shift, I hit Chord Memory. And remember in another video, I mentioned just making a beat with just one finger. catch that? Let me start it over. That's a whole progression. That's one note. Are you serious? And it just goes on and on. Yeah. and that's the stuff that makes me happy. And with the Arpeggiator, you can turn that on and it's just going to run through the notes. Do you understand? Like, fuck the bullshit. This, wow. You know what I mean? That is so powerful. And you can record that. you could totally record that to a track and set it up. Or you freehand it into Logic. Just make sure the tempo is matched or whatever your preference of DAW is. That just made this everything for me. And in the rhythm section, I'm not, again, because I don't use this, because I have a drum machine, I have all the other stuff in Logic, I don't use this section too often, but it's got a rhythm section that you can edit in multiple different ways. I forgot how to do this. Oh, that's what it was. Let's turn it up. So the rhythm section, you can choose the rhythm pattern to start with, and it will just play the pattern, and then you can add to it. That's what it was. That's what the rhythm section was important for. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this machine is ridiculous. There's one I'm trying to see if it's in here, because I think I remember that's how it was, but let me see if I can find it real quick. And as you can see, there's 256 of these things in here. I could have sworn one of them actually had the word Roland in here and it was playing, but I can't remember. But you get the point. There's tons going on in here, and you can assign the drum kit that this triggers. I'm not even gonna go into the rhythm more than that. That made my point. So now we deal with the thing that I haven't dealt with yet, which is the D-beam. The D-beam is interesting because the D-beam, you can turn it on, you can set it to a pad. So right now, it's set to pad 1. Or I can set it to a synth, which the synth always sounds terrible because I've never changed it. It's kind of like a theremin. If you know what a theremin is, it's kind of what it is. And then mix input, you can set up how things are routed into your machine for the audio input. So you're recording in, and you can set up if you want to add effects to it, what kind of effects, before the audio comes into the machine. So this is like me tracking my audio in for recording vocals or anything like that. And you could turn it on or off. You could set up the actual effects and just, go crazy with this. Like, this machine did way too much. These are the reasons why this thing had to come back into my life. When I had this the last time, I was doing so much with it, and I stopped making phenomenal music when I got rid of this. And I thought going in the box was the right move. This doesn't mean you can't do that. I always say that in every video. You can totally do these things in the box. It's just how much more work do you want to do it? And that was my conversation with myself. This alone does so much more than the millions of patches the millions of things that I have in my computer for sounds, because I literally sit here and say, here's the synth, here's the drums, here's the keyboard, here's the piano. Oh, you know what? I need horns. There's like 4 horns that I know will work, and I can layer them. Boom. You know, as an example, we go into if we go into loading everything real quick, and I go to the card, and I'm going to go down to one of the songs that I did in here. Just trying to find a good one real quick. Yeah, it should work. All right, I didn't load the card in the first place, so we're going to have to wait for this. I'll be right back. Let me go get some coffee. So last thing we'll cover real quick, but going back to what I was saying about the sequencer and loading stuff from your saved information. Now, just remember, this goes faster if I had already had the card plugged in, but I didn't have it plugged in, so we had to do it the long way. But it usually preloads all of this stuff into the machine and it's ready to go. And there's a brief loading time of the actual track, but it goes relatively quick. Or if I go to the strings, so I took that and I layered it with this one. And I think there was one other string in here. Let me just just check real quick. Now, if I add all 3 of those string patches together to hear all of the data, but you see how that invokes an emotion just from hearing that by itself. And then the pianos, I kind of did the same thing. For the pianos, it was just like a backing of the strings. When you play this all together, and I mean, this is not fully mixed, but you get the idea. And this is not putting any major load on this machine. This still had a ton of room to go. I don't even think I didn't add a lot of effects. I have 2 compressors, an equalizer, a hall reverb. I routed everything to the stereo 1 and 2 outs. And I tracked it out in 2 channels at a time. You know, basic structure, nothing too complicated. Fantom is a monster. Again, this is 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008. This is that time frame when this was the king of keyboards. I will say this was the king of keyboards. Like, there wasn't too many things out there that even came close to competing with this thing. This is why I chose this keyboard again. This keyboard is amazing. It does far too much crap for a machine from 2005, 2006. It covers so many of the basis of what I need to do just to get my production going. Yes, I have to track it all in, but that doesn't matter because honestly, when you're dealing in a production environment, you're going to be tracking a lot of things in. Some people do stuff internally and that's totally fine, but you'll still have those session musicians that come in and use a keyboard, or those who know how to play, who know what they want to get out of this. Like, I know the patches I really need to get what I want to get out of this keyboard. So the Fantom, I will say the Fantom is the king of keyboards for that time frame. And going forward, Nothing really replaced it for a very long time, except for the next Fantom, and then the next Fantom, and the next Fantom. That's pretty much the reality. If you're looking for a keyboard that pretty much does every single thing you need it to do, and you can track yourself, you can record yourself into it as well, every Fantom from the Fantom X forward to today is the way to go. All the other keyboards are just basically extra sound modules. And I'm sorry, manufacturers, I hate to make it sound that way, but that's the truth. If you nobody uses the motif for its sequencer. Nobody, I mean, they're probably better now, but back then nobody used it for the sequencer. Nobody used the Triton for its sequencer. Not really. Everybody used it as a sound module. The keys were just a bonus. That doesn't diminish their assistance with the growth of music production and the music quality as hits after hits after hits that were made with those keyboards. But there are so many hits that were made with just this keyboard. Like, share, and subscribe. Join me next time, and I will catch you then. I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.